Yo, welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're doing my Kuro Kiseki 2 Platinum review. What that means is I platinumed the game. I've done everything in the game. The only thing I haven't done is the DLC due to a certain bug in the game. But yep. So once again, let's get some clean house stuff out of the way. Once again, spoilers of the game. I don't think I should really be saying that. It should be pretty obvious. But yes, once again, spoilers of the game. Also, just to kind of give like where my perspective of the Trails of games are. Once again, one of the highest rated games I consider for the Trails of series is Kuro 1 and CS3. So that's kind of my bar line of really good games. Once again, I really like them. They're small in character size and they tell a linear progressive story. I like that. I like that about those games. So let's get into the good and the bad of this game. Just to get it out of the way, because I have a lot to talk about on the bad section, let's talk about the good section. If you like Kuro 1, you're going to like Kuro 2. It's a lot more of that game. It follows the sort of the same structure, other than the storytelling, which we'll get in a bit. But Kuro 2 is kind of a mix of Kuro 1 and Trails in the River Corridor, with specifically split storylines and in the Togi Castle and the River Corridor, kind of sort of like acting like a hub area for everyone to come together. It has very much similarities to that. And they once again in interviews they said the Marching Garden is sort of referenced or modeled after the true Revier Corridor. But once again, I think if you like the first game, there's gonna be very much a lot of similarities from that. The biggest additions to that are the change in fishing, and you can almost pretty much fish anywhere. Is the fishing and the mini games. There's basketball, hacking, and the new card game and the follow mechanic, the hidden stalking mechanic. Basketball, just to give you guys a heads up, just block, never steal. Stealing is worthless. The card game is completely based on luck, by the way, so there's no guaranteed ways of winning. The hacking mini game, it's boring, but it's there. It adds a new pace of things into it. The worst one is honestly the stalking games, mini games. It's mostly for SP points, and you need to do it perfectly. I think there's absolutely ways of making it better, speeding it up. They really need to speed it up, and specifically telling you when the end of a section is, so you're not sitting there like, are they supposed to be going or something? No, those would be the biggest ones. Oh, and also pointing out the next hiding points, because it's not always clear where the next hiding point is. So there's definitely some improvements for the stalking mini game. But yeah, once again, if you like Kuro 1, you're gonna like Kuro 2. Can't really say much more than that, but I feel like those are really, really good. So let's move on to the bad. So I'm going to split this in two different parts: story and characters and bugs. So in order to really explain both of them, there is something I really got to talk to you guys about this, and that's the development of Trails games. Back a while back, Kondo in an interview stated that he needs to end the series within a timely manner because the people that have been playing this game since Sky One need a conclusion for the series, and over time he knows those players will either lose interest or just become too old to play the games at this point. He knows he needs to end the series within a timely manner. That's why ever since Trails in the River Corridor, we've been getting pretty much the games year after year. I believe between CS4 and River Corridor, I believe there was 2 years. River Corridor to Kuro 2, it's been 1 year. So he knows he needs to get the games out as fast as possible in order to conclude the story. In a recent interview, Kondo has stated that the game, story-wise, is roughly 70% done, and that there anticipates at least 2 to 3 more games, major games in the series, as in their own like Cold Steel or Sky or Crossbill series. That's what he kind of sort of means. But once again, in the community, it's a little bit of a give and take because we don't know how serious or how accurate that 70% is, simply for the fact that in the past we couldn't gauge what or how much filler they put in. To give you a reference, Sky 1 and 2 should have been one game. Sky 3 was never intended, but they needed to make that game in order to wrap up the series. Owl and Zero were never part of the schedule. They were not supposed to do a cross-spell series, but they did. Cold Steel was always intended to be a trilogy, yet now we see that it's 4 games. And we also have Hajimari no Kiseki to wrap up pretty much Crossspell and Cold Steel together. Kuro 1 was always supposed to be like intended one game in the series, but now, as of the DLC patch, we know that there's going to be 3 games at minimum. If you guys don't know, the DLC's special hidden ending, they announced Kuro, Kuro 3 possibly the conclusion. We don't know what that means, but other than there's another game in the franchise for Kuro. So yeah, as you can see, we can't really gauge the 70% that Kondo means all the time. So if I were to guess at face value what he means by the 70%, we're 70% done. There's going to be 3 more major game titles with duologies or trilogies in the franchise, plus a finale game to wrap up the series, aka something like Trails in the River Quarter, where it brings all the stories together into one game, and we can conclude with that. So essentially, those three separate games will probably at minimum have duologies, so that's 6 games. Kuro 3, that's 7 games, and a final game that would be 8 games. So that's 8 games we're looking at, which would probably take 8 more years, which is still quite a bit. That's if they release each game every single year, and that's always not possible because of, they might want to update stuff or, change the engine or whatever. So we don't know what is technically beyond that, and that doesn't even include, other games from Neon Falcon that could possibly, push development time. We also know from a recent interview, Kondo says they're planning on, or he wants to remake the Sky series for people to play, which I think is a great idea. But we don't know, once again, if that were to happen, we don't know how long that pushes the timeline down for these games as well too. So once again, it's going to be, he knows he's on a deadline to finish this franchise, and he needs to speed out the games. So it shows why they're doing on a yearly cycle kind of thing right now. But as we've seen in the past with yearly cycle games, things are sacrificed, aka bugs or the overall plot of the cohesion of the game, and that's kind of what we're seeing right now. Trails of the Games are not really notorious for bugs, but there are bugs if you play the Japanese versions. Even if you play the English version, just letting you know, CS3, CS4 had the original bugs from the Japanese copies of the game in English. Nisa, I don't know why they didn't use the later patches of the game. That was really strange that they didn't use the later patches of the game, but that's a Nisa problem, I guess. But other than that, there have been bugs. Notoriously, the most notorious one was the Emma Master Quartz bug in New Game Plus. I think that was the biggest one in the past. Kuro 2 had quite a bit of impactful bugs. The big ones were Rennie completely resetting, the DLC not being accessible in New Game Plus, which I experienced and was very frustrating for me because I pretty much, until the 1021 update, I could technically access the DLC, but I didn't want to because it wasn't on the latest game save I had. And the notorious Connect bug. This one was a major one for a lot of players that played the game early. If you went to New Game Plus, there's some major problems with the Connect. That Connect rewards weren't given out to you. They would over level the Connect and reset back to 0, or people were at the wrong Connect stage levels. That was a major one that a lot of people pretty much stopped a lot of people's trophies dead flat. So once again, those slip through the crack. Once again, we can kind of all sort of ignore bugs until it really affects us and how you play the game. So ultimately they will be fixed, and I understand that. But this one has much, much more bugs than other ones in the past series have. So once again, that is a little bit of a downer, but it's not the real reason I am a little bit hesitant about Kuro 2. So we're going to talk, once again, with knowing how the timeline of how things are made in Kuro and how it's affecting bugs. It's also what I feel is affecting the story. The gimmick of Kuro 2 is the Genesis and being able to rewind time. And once again, like this is once again my opinion and why I don't really vibe a whole lot with the story. I still like the game and the story in parts, but it just feels a little bit. It feels out of touch a little bit. So the Genesis can rewind time in this game, and that's a major point. Every time you die and you need to figure out what went wrong, you use the Genesis to rewind time. In death in video games and other pieces of art, I feel like death should be meaningful, or at least deserved, or you know, earned on that part in order to make an impact on the player. But because you use the Genesis is pretty much a cheat rewind mechanic where you can use it every time you fail, it feels like a lot of the deaths in this game aren't really earned. They truly don't feel like all of them are really earned or matter. It just feels like, oh, just rewind time kind of thing. And that's why it feels like in a lot of situations where, you have specific setups, you're stronger than your opponent, but you somehow lose, or you have like people like Shizuna Rim who have extra sensory abilities. We're just dying to C4 apparently because they couldn't sense it in time or something like that. Even though they have they have extra sensory hearing or reflexes like spider senses, we just die. In order to prove a point to the main cast of characters, in order to do something else, in order to shift the story, it just feels cheat. It doesn't feel like a lot of the deaths are earned in this game. And that's why my biggest problem with the Genesis and the rewind time mechanic, I understand that's the crux and they need to do that. But I feel like if a lot of more stuff were earned, a lot of those deaths were earned, it'd feel a lot better and we would an actual impactful need to the story as to why we need to rewind time and do certain different things. I feel like it would have been better. But once again, those are my sort of opinions. And I alluded to this a little bit before. I really not. I like Trails in the Reverie Corridor, but I feel like I like Kuro 1 and Steel 3 more because it's once again it's a small cast of characters with a linear story. It feels like every second-ish game they have to like up the stakes. They have to up everything in order to push the story forward. And you can see this in like CS4, Azure, and even in this game, where they need to up how many characters are playable. They need to up the story in order to progress everything. And I just feel like some of it isn't warranted. To kind of show off a bit, this Rixia Mao and Fee literally show up at the end of the game for no reason on a random festival. I just didn't understand that. I don't know. It felt like it was shoehorned in just to make an appearance and just to make a point. Fee is obviously in the DLC of the game along with Jin. These aren't playable characters. They're playable characters, but they only come in the DLC for the last 7 levels of the Marching Garden. I should have explained that. DLC in this game, they added 7 levels to the Marching Garden and the hidden ending, which once again shows Kuro 3. I understand Jin a little bit because he's actually in the game quite a bit. Fee literally shows up once in the game at the very end. And so does Rixia. It just doesn't feel, once again, it doesn't feel earned that they belong in this game. I feel like this could have gone to Barkhorn. Even though Barkhorn wasn't in the game, he was a bigger presence in Kuro 1 than Fee was. I feel like Fee was just here because they had the assets. And this is before even getting into Rion and Celis. Story-wise, I understand them being in the game. Playable-wise, I really don't understand why they were playable. I understand them story-wise, but playable-wise is really, really weird. You can play them in the Marching Garden, but it just doesn't feel justified that why they're playable. You can play them once in Chapter 1. Rion gets playable like for maybe 30 minutes, like maybe 15 minutes, 30 to 15 minutes later on in like Chapter 4. But Celis was only playable in one part of the game. It feels like they should have just stayed as, like people in the story rather than playable characters. I guess it's just like, hey, we can do this. Isn't this cool, guys? At least it feels like Rene, Rene and like Shizuna a little bit more justified being playable because there's so much more. There's so much more in the game than Xion and Celis, because you play them once in the game. Technically, Run you play twice, but it's so minuscule that doesn't even matter. It just doesn't feel justified. It just goes to show you, like, they're just trying to shove as many people playable as possible into the game in order to progress stuff. And I think it's cool and all, but is it really justified? Ultimately, once again, that is a complete opinion-based thing. I still really, really enjoy Kuro 2, guys. Some of the bad stuff does hamper it a little bit, but I really enjoy this game. I really want to see Kuro 3. I really hope they take it they take a step back, make it at most leave it at this as a playable character list, and finish up the story like that. I'm really hoping that's what happens, but knowing past games, they're probably going to go with the overextension of a lot of characters in order to make the finale as big as possible and like more of a fan service kind of thing. And that's not bad. It's just sometimes you have to make it justified. You have to justify it in that sense. Alrighty, folks. That'll be it for me today. Thank you all for watching. Peace out.